And good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for November 19, 2012. First item on our agenda is the consideration of minutes for our regular meeting of October 24, 2012. And those minutes are included with our agenda materials. Are there any changes to those minutes? If not, those minutes will stand approved as presented. And we will now take up some new business. First, we'll take up a signed variance request. It is application S12061 by Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC for Reynolds Holding and Development, LLC. He's requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4, 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 526 Dill Lane. Ms. Kerr, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. The applicant, Mr. Matt Taylor, representing Reynolds Holding and Development, LLC, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4, 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a foundation or sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement without the consent of the easement holder and the approval of Board of Zoning Appeals. The proposed sign is located within a PRD zone. The applicant is requesting permission to erect one externally illuminated ground sign with 8 square feet of display area and an overall height of 5 feet 4 inches. And the sign will be located within a 20-foot sanitary sewer easement, and an agreement for a sign in the City of Murfreesboro easement has been signed by the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department, as well as the Director of Building and Codes. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations, and Mr. Jamie Reed, as well as myself, are here to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? All right. Thank you. Mr. Reed, anything you'd like to add to your application? There you are. All right, then at this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussions or motion.
Chairman Rogers, I make a motion we approve subject to staff comments.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Reed, that application has been approved. And we will now consider our next application. It's a variance request on application Z12062 by Mr. Chris Wire, requesting a 3-foot variance from the minimum required 20-foot rear building setback for principal structures. Let's see, as stated in Chart 2 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, and this is for property located in a residential zero lot line zone at 2345 Will Drew Drive. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. The subject property, as you mentioned, is located at 2345 Will Drew Drive. It's located in the Salem Cove Crossing subdivision. And if I could ask one of the folks from the cable department, the computer was frozen for just a moment, but it is now unfrozen. And it's frozen again. Hopefully it'll catch up to me, and I can show you some exhibits in a moment, hopefully. The property, as you mentioned, is in the Salem Cove Crossing subdivision at 2345 Will Drew Drive. You'll recall that we had a rear setback variance for property about 2 or 3 houses down, and during the meeting, there were questions asked about the sunroom addition several houses to the north of where the property was located back in July, which was at 2351 Will Drew Drive. There were questions asked about whether or not this existing sunroom was in compliance with the rear setback requirement of 20 feet in the RZ zone, because it appeared very similar in proximity to the rear property line than what was being proposed. After the meeting, staff researched the sunroom that was discussed during that meeting, the existing sunroom, and it was determined that it was in violation of the rear setback requirement. a permit had been taken out in 2006 for the sunroom addition, but it was never its final inspection never passed, or it never received a final inspection or a certificate of occupancy. And at that time, it would have been hopefully caught at that time that it was not compliant with the rear setback by our building inspector, but because he did not have the opportunity to inspect it, it was not known until we looked into it after the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We contacted the homeowner, Mr. Chris Wire, who owns it with some family members, and his mother actually resides there. We contacted Mr. Wire, and Mr. Wire promptly contacted us back, and he was unaware of the violation. He had pulled the permit himself, but according to what he has informed the planning department was that he had delegated that work to a contractor who he assumed would follow through, get all necessary inspections, and build it in compliance with the city's minimum requirements. But that was not the case, so he is asking for forgiveness instead of permission in this instance. After it was reasonably determined that the rear setback was likely in violation, Mr. Wire had Huddleston Steel perform a survey of the property to determine the exact distance from the rear property line, and it's 17.13 feet from the rear property line, and the rear setback in the RZ zone is 20 feet. The subject property is bordered by single-family residential uses on all sides, and as it looks like we are, it looks like we have technology back on our side now. There we go. There we go. Here's the survey of the property. You can see the existing sunroom is it's hard for me to talk over the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme song.
That's from Lonesome Dove or what?
I think that was the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think.
Saloon door. Clint Eastwood before his chair talking day.
At any rate, you can see the existing sunroom is hatched out. It was built over the original patio, and as you can see, it's 17.13 feet from that rear property line at its closest point. It complies with the side setback. So Mr. Wire has made application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a 3-foot rear setback variance so that this sunroom addition is no longer in violation of the city's zoning ordinance. I'll show you some photographs. This is the front of the structure. This is looking back towards the sunroom, and you can see on the end of the structure is the sunroom that was constructed. This is the existing sunroom addition. You're looking south. Once again, looking south. You'll see in the distance is Mr. Mullen's property. He is the gentleman who requested a variance back in July for 2351 Will Drew, and he was granted that variance. Of course, that was requesting that variance in advance of building it. And this is looking at the sunroom from the rear property line. And a few shots of the sunroom looking north. And then looking east from the rear of the subject property, the lots that are facing to the north and to the south, to the rear of the subject property, are very, very deep and have very deep backyards. The properties that are facing east and west, like the ones fronting on Will Drew Drive, like the subject property, is not very deep. One of the reasons that Mr. Wire gives in his materials is very similar to the reason that Mr. Mullen gave for his request, is that the lot, which is 115 feet deep, is one of the shallowest in the subdivision, and a review of the lot depths on the city's GIS system confirms this, as the lots in Salem Cove Crossing range from 115 feet, like Mr. Wire's lot, to approximately 175 feet deep. In addition, it appears that the subject house was constructed approximately 2 to 3 feet behind the front setback line. If it had been constructed right at the front setback line instead, a rear setback variance may not have been necessary to construct the sunroom addition. As I mentioned, there was a similar request earlier this year. With that being said, if the board approves this request, staff recommends the following condition. All permits and inspections required by the Building and Codes Department for this sunroom addition must be obtained. Mr. Wire will need to, because the permit that was issued in 2006 has expired because no final inspection was ever obtained, he will have to apply for another building permit and then get a final inspection in order to get his certificate of occupancy for the building. So if the variance is granted, there would be no outstanding zoning issues, but there would be some outstanding building and codes issues. Mr. Wire is in attendance today if you have any questions for him, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as well before or after the public hearing.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley?
I just have one. So by the looks of this picture, nothing could be built behind this house in the first place because these are all common lots adjoining each other. Is that correct?
Well, those are actually the backyards of those lots. So theoretically, someone may be able to put some type of accessory structure back there. But for the most part, I believe they'll remain open.
Right. Okay.
All right. Mr. Wire, anything you'd like to add? Do we need to play your theme music again while you're coming up?
Somebody to call me, I could do that. Yeah. I apologize. It's kind of embarrassing. I think that just so you know, the assumption that I had when we did that was just kind of an open field. It wasn't really attached. I figured everybody had a short lot, and that was just a big field that was there, and nobody had ever built anything on it, kind of a common area, if you will. An erroneous assumption, I find out, but nonetheless the one that I made, and I just never fathomed the issue of a setback there. And so Mr. Brumley covered it correctly. I'm here to fall on my sword. I made a mistake. Didn't do my homework.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Wire? We know as a fan of contentious board meetings.
Been there, done that.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
At this time, then, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the application subject to staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that application has been approved. Thank you. No problem at all. Absolutely. Give you that. All right. We'll now consider, moving on, application Z12063, a special use permit request by Ms. Lissa Young. She's requesting a special use permit in order to conduct a home occupation clothing sales at her residence located at 3419 Meadowcrest Drive. And this property is located in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. Mr. Blomley, if you'd review that one for us, please.
I believe Mr. Young.
I will, as this application involves my wife and my residence, I will sit out but be available to answer any questions that anybody may have.
All right, thank you, Chairman Rogers. The subject property, as you mentioned, is located at 3419 Meadowcrest Drive, which is located in the Oakley Subdivision. property is zoned RS-15. The applicant has made a request for a home-based business that will generate a small amount of traffic. And any time that we have a home-based business that has traffic coming to and from it, we cannot approve that administratively. It requires a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so accordingly, Ms. Young has made application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit. As I mentioned, if we could pull up the aerial, which we've already done, subject property is at 3419 Meadowcrest, and you'll see an aerial shot of the property on the TV in front of you. Meadowcrest is a side street that runs off of Oakley Drive, which is the main street that comes in off of Sulphur Springs Road that runs the length of the subdivision. The applicant's business, and I'll try to describe it for you, and she is available if you'd like any more detail on it. According to her, the home-based business will involve events held at her home quarterly, 4 times a year, lasting approximately 1 week per event. Prior to each quarterly event, UPS will deliver 3 to 4 boxes of clothes. The boxes contain one of each of the items that the applicant will be offering for sale during the event. She will notify clients by postcard and email of the quarterly events. Clients will visit by appointment only, and the applicant has indicated that the maximum number of appointments that she anticipates per day is 5. Appointments will begin no earlier than 9 a.m. and end no later than 6 p.m. Because the clothes that are shipped to the applicant's home are just samples, any items purchased will be ordered and then shipped to the customer. Ms. Young has submitted a write-up addressing sections 8 and 9 of the zoning ordinance, including the standards for home-based businesses. The home-based business will be conducted entirely from within the principal structure and will not occupy more than 25% of the square footage of the house. More specifically, it will occupy about 10% of the square footage of the house, as Ms. Young has indicated that it will be that the appointments will be conducted in the dining room and the den. She has also indicated that she will have no employees, that there will be no alteration to the existing house, no outdoor storage, and no group instruction in conjunction with the home-based business. As you can see on the aerial photo, there is a driveway coming in from Meadowcrest Drive. It's a standard residential driveway. The garage is side entry from the north. But with there only being one client present at a time, the driveway should be more than adequate to handle the amount of traffic that will be generated at a time, and that there should be ample room on site to handle any client parking. Now, there's some photographs of the property. There's the front of the house. And there's a view of the driveway and the parking area. And this is looking west in the back of the driveway. In other words, to the rear of the house. This is the property next door to the north. The property next door to the south. And the property to the east across Meadowcrest Drive.
Stunning automobile.
I tend to agree with you. It just jumps off the computer.
It really does. Nothing like it.
With that being said, if the board approves this request, staff recommends the following conditions. All client visits shall be by appointment only, and there shall be a maximum of 5 appointments per business day. All appointments shall end no later than 6 p.m., and the special use permit shall lapse upon the transfer of the subject property to another owner. And the reason that we are putting that recommended condition in the staff comments is that while we have a very specific understanding of how the applicant will conduct her business, any future owners of the property may not have the same understanding of what the parameters are of the business and may not adhere to those, whether they are knowingly not adhering to them or not. So because it's of a very limited nature right now, and the applicant understands what the parameters of the business are, staff felt that it was appropriate that condition number 3 be recommended to the board. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Ms. Young is in attendance today if you have any questions for her. One thing that I did want to point out is that we did receive some written correspondence, and I put that in front of you. We received a letter, and I wanted to make sure I got this on the record. We received a letter from Greg and Audra Guerin at 3435 Meadowcrest Drive. And we received a letter from Jan Irwin at 3416 Meadowcrest Drive. And so if you'd like to take a moment to read those over, and then we'll need to conduct our public hearing.
Okay. I think everybody's had an opportunity to review that correspondence. Are there any questions for Mr. Blomley?
Just addressing these 2 letters. 2 questions. One, in the Guerin letter, it talks about restrictive covenants. That's not something that we deal with as part of this board. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct. Those are, we deal with our city ordinances and zoning regulations, and restrictive covenants are privately enforced.
All right. And then the next question that Ms. Irwin brings up is the fact that that future businesses in this neighborhood may not be as non-intrusive as this proposed business. That being said, any business would have to come before this board if it's going to be done in a residence, whether it's in this neighborhood or any neighborhood that's not zoned correctly, correct?
That's correct. Any home-based business that does not meet the criteria of what staff can approve administratively will either not be allowed, depending on what type of business it is, or will be subject to a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And each application that comes before the Board of Zoning Appeals is reviewed on its own merits. It's incumbent upon the applicant to prove that he or she is meeting the standards that are in our zoning ordinance, and the board will review each one on its merits. So it's not necessarily a setting a precedent if one special use permit is approved. Mr. Ives, would you agree with that?
I agree, yes.
Thank you.
Matthew, are there other city-approved home-based businesses in this subdivision?
Mr. Rogers, I actually, after receiving the call this morning, I had the same question pop up into my head, and so with the help of Ms. Davis, she ran through her spreadsheet a query to find out whether or not there were any home-based businesses. And in the past, now whether or not these are all active or whether or not some have closed, through the years we have approved administratively 8 home-based businesses in the Oakley subdivision. That at least 8. That's what we were able to count just by running a quick query of the street names in Ms. Davis's records.
What are the nature of the businesses? Do you know?
We did not look that closely at it, but they would be of the type that we could approve administratively, i.e., no traffic, no signage, very low-impact type home-based businesses.
Okay. And the fact that there will be traffic to this one is what requires, it takes it out of administrative approval.
That is correct.
What about signage? Is there any signage on this one?
Ms. Young is not requesting any signage.
Okay.
And in order to be approved for signage, she would have to make that explicit in her application.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Lizzie, you want to add anything to the application? Okay. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
I'm going to make a motion that we grant the, it's not a variance, what a special use permit. And I do understand the concerns that were outlined, even though they're not here in these letters, but I think Mr. Blomley has addressed any concerns that I would have. I feel like that this is, and I'll use Ms. Irwin's term, non-intrusive business, and I dare say that this is going on other places that don't ever come before us, but that's either here nor there. So anyway, I would make a motion that we approve the special use permit.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion. Yeah, this application, I mean, we're talking a week, 4 times a year, appointments only, 5 appointments a day. The hours are limited from 9 to 6. Maybe one of the lowest impact applications that we've seen for this type of special use permit in a neighborhood. It seems to me it's about as the least amount of burden on the neighborhood as I can remember seeing an application. So I'll second the motion for approval.
And would that be subject to staff comments?
Yes.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. That application has been approved. All right. Which takes us on now to staff reports and other business. Matthew, do you have any staff reports or other business?
Just a reminder that our December Board of Zoning Appeals meeting will be on December 17th, which is a Monday.
December 17th. Okay. Very good. Well, at this time, we have a retiring board member, the first time a board member has retired in 5 years. And so our Adam Dodd is going to leave us to go on to bigger and better things. And just for the sake of audio, Adam, if you'd meet me down here at the podium.
It's definitely not for visual. I can.
I can tell you that.
Full body. Tired of just seeing the torso and head. Well, as I said, Adam Dodd has been a member of the board since 2007, a very valued member, but we've had recently a shakeup in our judicial system here in Rutherford County where we've promoted some judges, and Adam, who previously served as a part-time magistrate in the juvenile court system, has now been asked to fill a full-time position as a judicial magistrate with Judge Donna Scott. So he'll be serving that role, and as such, he is prevented from continuing to serve us on the Board of Zoning Appeals. But we did want to express to him before he leaves how valued a member he has been to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We have this plaque presented to Adam Dodd in appreciation for your service on the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals, July 2007 through November 2012. And Adam, we want to tell you again how much we appreciate your service, and also we want to wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been my thanks, guys. Yeah, speech. It's been my privilege and pleasure to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals. I really appreciate all the personal and professional relationships over the years, and it's just it's sad to go, but that's how life is. So I'll move on and look forward to seeing all you folks around town, and hopefully our relationships won't end. But I really do appreciate the opportunity from the mayor and city council to serve in this position and follow Mr. Nelms, who was a longtime valued member of this board, and so I was proud to step into his shoes, and I appreciate each one of you. Thanks for the play.
All right. Thank you, Adam. We sincerely appreciate all your contributions over the last 5 years. We're sorry to see you go. All right. Any other business?
Just from a staff standpoint, I also wanted to express our thanks to Adam for his service. We have a great board here of dedicated Board of Zoning Appeals members, and Adam is no exception. He's done a great job for the city over the last 5.5 years, and we're proud of him for his service and for his new position that he'll be taking on, and we certainly appreciate his hard work as city staff. Wanted to express that.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that. I sent a letter to the mayor, and in that letter, addressed how appreciative I am of staff and everyone we've worked with, and how professional and how well you do your job. So, not that he didn't already know that or need me to tell him that, but I do appreciate y'all as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? If not, we're adjourned.